is called, broke out on 23rd February by the Russian calendar, because the Russians were still following an old calendar. It was 8th March by the Western calendar, International Working Women's Day. In those days it was organized by the socialist organizations. It was a day to mobilize women workers for their equal rights. It was not a day when bonds issued certificates. Now, on International Women's Day, already before that, we have seen what the war had resulted in. Food crisis, huge number of women workers. Russia, as with most other countries, still had a very patriarchal social order. So women had to work in the factories. They also had the double burden of feeding the family, standing in the queue for bread. So on Women's Day, the women workers decided to come out on strike. So the strike was begun by women textile workers, not the workers of heavy industries. The day before, the Bolshevik leader of the Vyborg district, the most militant area of Petrograd, Kayurov, had tried explaining to the workers that the time was not ripe. And so he was unhappy to find that his advice had been ignored, and the women workers came out on strike and they moved to other factories. On the first day, more than 83,000 workers were on strike. On the second day, it had become a general strike with nearly 2 lakh workers on strike. And it was on the second day that the first leaflets calling for general strike appeared. There were 2 leaflets, one issued by an organization known as the Mezrayonsi or Inter-District Committee. People, many of whom were former Bolsheviks, some were known as Menshevik internationalists who had left the Mensheviks and had formed an in-between organization. The other leaflet was by the Vyborg District Committee of the Bolsheviks. The Bolshevik Russian Bureau of the Central Committee issued a leaflet on the third day when they said the major battle is yet to come. Wait. And in fact, Alexander Shliapnikov, the most important leader of the Bolshevik Russian Bureau, when workers went to him and appealed for arms, suggested that it was not enough because the party didn't have enough arms. By the third day, the strike had become completely general, but a major problem that the workers were facing. This was a problem which all revolutions face, because ultimately a revolution, if it is to be not merely a bread riot, if it is to be not merely a strike, but a political overthrow of the state, comes up against the armed forces of the state. Friedrich Engels, in his last years, had been dealing with this when he wrote that barricade fighting is over. His question was not, he was not suggesting that elections are the only way. He was asking actually the question, if barricade is not the way to win over the army, what are the ways to win over the army? And at the end of the third day, this seemed to be in balance, because the Tsar sent an order, which we saw in that film, that used the army to suppress all disturbance in the city. On the fourth day, there was some hesitation, but by the evening of the fourth day, the first regiment, the Pavlovsky, had rebelled. They refused to fight the workers because they felt that this struggle was also their struggle, because the workers were calling for food, they were calling for an end to this endless mass killing which was going on. By the fifth day, the entire army had practically deserted the Tsar. At this point, the Tsar, however, was still adamant, and he sent an order saying that the Duma was dissolved. Rodzianko, the speaker, as we say in English, they had a different term in Russia, wrote in his memoirs that we kept order. We did not challenge the Tsar's decision. We said hurrah for the Tsar. We only decided that we would not go home, we would remain in the city. So formally, the Duma no longer remained in existence. This is a matter of importance, because when the next day, after 5 days, it was clear to the Tsar's generals, if not to the Tsar, that the army could no longer keep order. So 7 generals told the Tsar that they were not going to take responsibility. It is at this point that the Tsar abdicated. So when the Tsar abdicated, there was no legally constituted body to which power could go. At this point, the Duma members had formed a committee, a private committee of Duma members. Meanwhile, remembering 1905, socialists, mainly the Mensheviks, because the leading Bolsheviks, many of the leading Bolsheviks had been arrested. All the Bolshevik Duma members had been arrested in 1914 itself and exiled to Siberia. So many of the Mensheviks came up to call for the formation of a Soviet. In the strikes, the leading position had been taken by Bolsheviks and the inter-district organization. But they had very few intellectuals. They had workers. The Mensheviks and the socialist revolutionaries had many more intellectuals. It was these intellectuals who came up and said, form a Soviet. And this time, unlike in 1905, they started by forming an executive committee first, and only then called on the workers to send their representatives. So the executive committee was heavily loaded with Mensheviks and socialist revolutionaries. Within the socialist revolutionaries equally, a split was emerging between a radical wing led by people like Natanson, Kamkov, and Maria Spiridonova, who wanted to push forward with their program, and others who were more cautious. Nonetheless, it was this Soviet which took the most important democratic decision of the February Revolution. This was known as the Order Number 1 of the Petrograd Soviet. And Sukhanov, who was a left-wing Menshevik, sometimes known as Menshevik internationalists, because the Mensheviks were split between those who supported the war and those who opposed the war. The Bolsheviks all opposed the war. The majority of the Mensheviks had supported the war, but a minority had opposed it. They were known as Menshevik internationalists. Sukhanov was present and he wrote a multi-volume memoirs later on. He says that soldiers dictated Order Number 1 to the Soviet leaders. This said that soldiers in the army have the same rights as everybody else. So from now on, feudal customs are stopped in the army. Soldiers need not carry out orders of the officers excepting on military duty. Soldiers very often, even today in the Indian army, carry out orders of officers having to do things much other than military matters, acting as ardadis of the officers to everything else. Soldiers have civil liberties. Soldiers have the right to elect their own committees and representatives. So the Soviet was trying to broaden itself by including not only workers but also soldiers. Thereafter, whenever anything happened, officers would complain that the reason Russia lost the war was because of this Order Number 1, which broke discipline in the army, as if Russia had not been losing the war all these years. What Order Number 1 did actually was give soldiers political rights, making the Russian army the most democratic army that existed anywhere in the world at that point of time. At this point also, the moderates, the liberals decided that they had to do something. So the committee of the members of the Duma now renamed itself a provisional government. With slight changes in personnel, Prince Lvov became the Prime Minister, Guchkov became the War Minister, Milyukov became the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and we have seen already what they stood for. And so this created a major gap. Workers and soldiers demanded three things. First, they wanted an end to the war, an end to this meaningless mass killings. Second, they wanted food. Everybody must be fed. Third, they wanted liberties. And the more far-sighted workers were also demanding, and certainly a large part of the soldiers, being peasants, were demanding land to the peasants. The provisional government's position was, first, the war is a matter of Russia's international treaty agreements. So the war must continue. Second, all question of land must wait till a constituent assembly is formed. And how is a constituent assembly going to be formed? The liberals were very clear that they did not want a quick meeting of the constituent assembly. If the February revolution was really a democratic revolution, as right-wing historians say, as I said right at the beginning, then why is it that from February to October, till the Bolsheviks led the Soviets into an insurrection, why was the Constituent Assembly not called? How long does it take to call a meeting of the Constituent Assembly? 3 weeks just to create an election commission. After that, they took a month to decide on the voting age. Should it be 18? Should it be 20? Or should it be 21? 15 days to decide whether the Tsar's family should have the vote. In other words, they were killing time so that elections are not called. It was only in June when there was a first Congress of Soviets and the Bolsheviks were becoming an influential force demanding that the Soviets should take power, that the provisional government finally declared that yes, elections to the Constituent Assembly will be called in September. Soon after, the liberals resigned and they came back to the government only with the assurance that elections would be postponed to November. In other words, the first point to understand if we say that the February Revolution is democratic is that the first principle of democracy, creating a democratic political structure, was not something that was taken up by the provisional government. Nor did the provisional government take many significant democratic steps. If we look at what Marxists have traditionally talked about, democratic revolution. At this point, we need to look a little bit into certain theoretical questions, because we are often told that, as I said, the Russian Revolution was a bourgeois democratic revolution, and the Bolsheviks, Lenin went beyond it. So, what is this nature of the revolution? First question, was there anything called democracy anywhere before the Russian Revolution? If you think this is a rhetorical question, ask yourself, in which country in the world did all men and women have votes before 1917? Answer, nowhere. In France, all men had votes, no women. In Germany, men had votes for the parliament, but it was topped by a semi-feudal upper house, and for the provincial elections, there was a class-based vote. In England, all workers did not have vote till the 20th century. In the United States, blacks were emancipated, but then Jim Crow made sure that until Martin Luther King's agitations, effectively blacks did not have the vote. So, where was a democracy in existence? The second point that Marxists make when they talk about a democratic revolution is they look at the French Revolution. And it's been argued that the French Revolution was a classical democratic revolution because the French Revolution created a democratic constitution, even though that was overthrown shortly, and it gave land to the peasants. Now, it's in this sense that Marxists insisted that the Russian Revolution should be a bourgeois democratic revolution. From 1902-3, however, things began to change. At the second Congress of the Social Democratic Party, the Bolshevik-Menshevik split had occurred. That had not occurred because of political differences. That had occurred, if you really look at the records, for a very simple reason. Because people who lost an election to the editorial board said that in that case we are going to pick up the bat and the wickets and we are going to go home and not play with you. The minority, which is what Menshevik means, wanted certain people in the editorial board of Iskra. They lost the vote and they said that Lenin is a dictator, Lenin wants to be a dictator. Now the interesting thing is, there were 3 members in the editorial board, Lenin, Plekhanov and Martov. Plekhanov was not under Lenin's thumb. So how was Lenin a dictator? The point was, they wanted their people, if they didn't have it, they would boycott it. But subsequently, from 1904, political differences did come. Plekhanov, as we had seen, had begun as a peasant revolutionary. Because of that, when he gave up his old position, he became very hostile to any idea that the peasants had any major role in the revolution. And he insisted that since the Russian Revolution was a bourgeois revolution or a bourgeois democratic revolution, it must be led by the bourgeoisie. This is where Lenin and Plekhanov differed very crucially. Now, this is a question where Marx is actually closer to Lenin and not to Plekhanov. In 1850, in the address of the Central Authority to the Communist League, Marx and Engels wrote, "The treacherous role that the German liberal bourgeoisie played against the people in 1848 will be assumed in the coming revolution by the democratic petty bourgeoisie, which now occupies the same position as the liberal bourgeoisie did before 1848. The relationship of the Workers' Party to the petty bourgeois Democrats is this: it cooperates with them against the party which they aim to overthrow. It opposes them wherever they wish to secure their own position. The democratic petty bourgeoisie want better wages and security for the workers and hope to achieve this by state employment and welfare measures. In short, they hope to bribe the workers with a disguised form of arms and to break their revolutionary strength. But these demands can in no way satisfy the party of the proletariat. While the democratic petty bourgeois want to bring the revolution to an end as quickly as possible, achieving at most the aims already mentioned, it is our interest, that is the Marxist party's interest, and our task to make the revolution permanent until all the more or less propertied classes have been driven from their ruling positions, until the proletariat has conquered state power, and until the association of the proletarians has progressed sufficiently far, not only in one country but in all the leading countries of the world, that competition between the proletarians ceases and at least the decisive forces of production are concentrated in the hands of the workers." So what was Lenin's position? Lenin followed Karl Kautsky because at this point Lenin saw Kautsky as standing much to the left of Plekhanov. In an article on the Russian workers, Kautsky said that in Russia the workers are much ahead of the bourgeoisie. And in the Russian bourgeois democratic revolution, the workers would play a more important role than the bourgeoisie. But Lenin was also committed to the question of democracy. Given that the working class was a minority in Russia, how could the workers alone make a revolution? So Lenin's answer was that the workers would not be alone in making the revolution. The the workers would form an alliance not with the liberals, but with the peasantry. So, Lenin's analysis at this point of time was based on his analysis of capitalism in Russia, which he made in his famous book, The Development of Capitalism in Russia, where he argued that industrial capitalism was the highest point of capitalism. Now, in that case, if the working class led the revolution, what would happen? Lenin said that it would be an alliance of the workers and the peasants, and he called this the revolutionary democratic dictatorship of the proletariat and the peasantry. His political conclusion in 1905, when he wrote True Tactics of Social Democracy in the Democratic Revolution, was: there is no doubt finally that in Russia too, the success of the peasant struggle, that is, the transfer of the whole of the land to the peasantry, will signify a complete democratic revolution. So for Lenin, not only political democracy, but the complete transfer of land to the peasants would signify the complete democratic revolution and constitute the social basis of the revolution carried through to its completion. But, Lenin says, this will by no means be a socialist revolution. The success of the peasant insurrection will clear the way for a genuine and decisive struggle for socialism on the basis of a democratic republic. And in subsequent articles, article after article, he hammers these points. 2 points. One is, the liberals are treacherous, the liberals are enemies, the working class is not to trust the liberals but to go against them, to form an alliance with the peasants. But on the other hand, this will lead to a democratic republic, which will be, he makes a contrast between what he calls the American path and the Prussian path. The Prussian path is how Germany achieved capitalism from above by turning landlords into capitalists. The American path is from below, where peasants spread out in the West and there was a capitalism from below. The question which, however, came up was that if the working class and the peasants in alliance made a revolution, would the minimum program be achieved? The minimum program included certain very specific rights of the workers. For example, the 8-hour day. As we saw, the revolution of 1905 showed clearly that the bourgeoisie was not willing to accept the 8-hour day. So, the question was, and this question was posed by Trotsky in 1905, that what would happen? He agreed that the liberals were not trustworthy. And in his book, Results and Prospects, written after 1905, he argues that the workers have to form an alliance with the peasantry in order to make the revolution. He even says that without peasant support, if the worker-peasant alliance is not possible, then the revolution will fail and the liberals will make an alliance with the Tsarist authorities. But he argues that if a revolutionary government with the Workers' Party comes to power and if it starts implementing the minimum program, if it implements the 8-hour day and the bourgeoisie replies by a lockout, what will the workers and peasants government do? Will it then take over the factories? Or will it say, since the bourgeoisie is not willing, we are going to step back? This is a problem which he insisted that they would face. In 1917, this would come up. And this would come up within the Bolshevik party itself. Before Lenin arrived, the leaders of the party, Lev Kamenev, Joseph Stalin, people who had been sent to Siberia and who had come back, from the middle of March, they were leading the party. And they took a position much to the left of the Mensheviks. They were opposed to the kind of position that the Mensheviks and the socialist revolutionaries were taking, which was that the bourgeoisie should be in government, there should be a provisional government of the bourgeoisie. They argued that there is a need for an eventual formation of a workers and peasants government which would carry out the tasks of the revolutionary democratic dictatorship of the proletariat and peasantry. But this is where Lenin's April thesis, when Lenin comes back, comes as a shock to them. In fact, when the April thesis were published in Pravda, it was published with a note by the editors that this is Comrade Lenin's personal thesis. That is, it does not have the sanction of the party. Why? Because Lenin makes certain points. The whole April thesis are 4 printed pages and I am not going to read them out. But thesis 1 says that the reason why the workers had not taken power in February was not objective but subjective. That the class-conscious proletariat could consent to a revolutionary war only if governmental power belonged to workers and the poorest peasants bordering on the proletariat. The second thesis said that power had gone to the bourgeoisie because of insufficient class consciousness and organization of the proletariat. The third thesis said we must oppose the provisional government. Flat. The fifth thesis said not a parliamentary republic but a republic of Soviets, of workers and agricultural laborers and peasants deputies. The eighth thesis said, however, and Lenin makes it very clear, that calling for a workers and peasants Soviet government does not mean instant socialism. Nobody is talking about that. Our immediate task is not to introduce socialism, but only to bring social production and distribution of products at once under the control of the Soviets. And this would lead to a debate within the Bolshevik party for a whole month. Throughout April there would be discussions. At the end of April there would be a conference of the party where Lenin wins with 70 votes, but Kamenev's proposal gets 39 votes. This, by the way, shows two things. The whole myth that Lenin was a dictator who would go this and the party would jump was a myth created by anti-communists. The Bolsheviks were a democratic party where it didn't matter who you were, whether you were Lenin or anybody else, you had to put your case, you had to argue your case, you had to convince the party that you were right. And the reason why Lenin could convince the party was the April crisis. The class struggle had a role. The workers and the soldiers were demanding peace. They were putting pressure on the Soviet, even the Menshevik and SR dominated Soviet. But the provisional government was refusing. Eventually, at the beginning of April, the provisional government issued a statement saying, Russia doesn't want annexations, Russia wants a democratic peace. But then, on 18th April, Milyukov as the foreign minister sent a secret note to all the allied ambassadors saying that no, actually this is a concession to the Soviet. We are still sticking to Russia's secret agreements. The result was 2 days later, this news came out. It was printed by the bourgeois papers and by the socialist papers, and there was a tremendous workers' unrest. For the first time, workers' demonstrations were fired upon after February. And this convinced a lot of Bolsheviks that Lenin was right, that as long as this provisional government, as long as this sort of a thing is in power, a democratic peace is impossible. What is needed is a Soviet government. But not everybody was convinced. Meanwhile, this crisis wasn't something that only drove some Bolsheviks to Lenin's side. It also drove a lot of workers to militant action, and 3 ministers had to resign, including Milyukov. At this point, the Mensheviks and SRs, who so far had been saying that look, this is a bourgeois revolution with 6 socialists entering the government. Many of the workers and even more peasants because the Bolsheviks were very weak among the peasants, while the socialist revolutionaries were very strong. So many of the workers and even more peasants were happy with this. They saw that Chernov, the leader of the Socialist Revolutionary Party, was becoming a minister. And they thought that this would mean that now land reforms were becoming a reality. What happened in fact was that the coalition government moved to the right. Although there were 6 socialists, it was the bourgeoisie who dictated terms. There was a congress of peasant deputies, and this congress saw left and right-wing socialist revolutionaries fighting. As a result of the pressure of the left wing, a resolution was adopted that land should be controlled by land committees. But then, when the Congress dispersed, the provisional government said, this is only an opinion of the peasant deputies, this is not binding on the government. As a result, what we find is that agrarian class conflict begins sharply. And there is one very important feature of this agrarian class conflict. Up to October, if we look at the recorded cases of major conflicts, by major conflict I am meaning not one individual peasant against one landlord, but where so-called mass riots took place. Because in police language, peasant rebellion is always a riot. You have more than 4,000 such cases which are peasants collectively fighting the landlords, and only 324 cases of conflicts between rich peasants and agricultural laborers. In other words, all the way to the October Revolution, the nature of the agrarian revolution was what Marxists have called the democratic revolution. It is only the working class taking power that ensured the transfer of land to the peasants. It did not happen before that. In the same way, when we look at the struggle of the nationalities, the only thing that the February Revolution did was it abolished the laws against the Jews. But for example, the Ukrainians gained nothing, because in Russia, Ukrainian was treated not as a separate language, but as a dialect of Russian. Comrades in Assam will understand this very well if one thinks about the pronouncements of certain chauvinists like Ramesh Chandra Majumdar once upon a time, who had proclaimed that Ahomia is not a separate language but a corrupted dialect of Bengali. So imagine if Bengalis had been the rulers of India, which they are not. That was the situation in Russia, that the Russian language we had seen was the dominant, and Ukrainians were told, you are not a separate nationality, you just speak bad Russian. In Finland, the Finns had a separate parliament. There the socialists had elected a majority. So the coalition government dissolved that Finnish parliament. In Central Asia, violence was repeated. So under the situation, all the elements of the democratic revolution, nationalities question, agrarian revolution, these were all unfulfilled all the way to the Soviet conquest of power. This is one crucial issue. The other issue that I want to address is the question of the relationship between the Bolshevik party and the working class. Because as I said, one of the key issues which we are told constantly is that it was a Bolshevik coup. Why was it a coup? Because hundreds of thousands of workers did not come out on the streets. Now the reason why hundreds of thousands of workers did not come out on the streets in October has to be found in when they had come out on the streets and how the battles had been fought. Two incidents stand out. One is known as the July days. In July, early July, workers and soldiers did come out on the streets against the advance of the Bolshevik leadership. The Bolsheviks felt that they were strong enough in the capital, but not in the country as a whole. But there was a pressure from below. Workers and soldiers came out, and Bolsheviks felt that they could not stand aside. They could not go against their class. So they moved with the workers and soldiers, but tried to turn it into something less than an insurrection. The provisional government and the Soviet leaders, by this time, a Congress of Soviets had been held, and it had elected a Central Executive Committee. This demonstration went to the Central Executive Committee. There's a famous eyewitness record, again by that same Sukhanov, who says that a group of workers surrounded Viktor Chernov and said, take the power, you son of a so-and-so, when it's given to you. So the workers were telling the leaders of the Soviet to take the power, and what happened was that they waited till the workers were tired, then they called in soldiers from outside the city who still trusted the Soviet leadership. They spread a rumor that Lenin was a German spy, that he was getting money from the Germans based on one simple thing, that he had come through Germany in order to enter Russia. And after this slander, they attacked the workers as counter-revolutionaries. And they hailed the army generals who had sent in the soldiers as defenders of the revolution. So this created a gap between the workers and the Bolshevik moderates and the socialist revolutionaries. Not only was the Bolshevik paper shut down, but even the Menshevik internationalist paper, Martov's group's paper, was shut down. At this point, Lenin occasionally suggested moving away from the Soviets to factory committees and trade unions, because in the factory committees and trade unions the Bolsheviks were already in a majority. But other Bolsheviks objected, because they argued that the factory committees and the trade unions were workers' institutions, but the peasants still trusted the Soviets. The second incident which happened was the attempt at counter-revolution. Kerensky became the prime minister, and he appointed General Kornilov as commander-in-chief. And Kornilov and Kerensky plotted a counter-revolution. This counter-revolution failed for three reasons. The first was there were two candidates for being the chief. Kerensky wanted to be the chief, Kornilov also wanted to be the chief. At one stage, their ambitions clashed and the conspiracy came out into the open. The second reason was that the workers had been defeated in July but not smashed. So a working class resistance developed. And the third reason was that the soldiers themselves, it was assumed that soldiers will obey orders because these are Cossack soldiers. In the meanwhile, however, several months had gone and even the Cossack soldiers refused to obey orders. As a result, the counter-revolution collapsed. But resistance to the counter-revolution was organized under Bolshevik leadership. So, the two occasions when masses did come out on the streets showed that in the working class, masses were moving very clearly in the direction of the Bolsheviks. And within the countryside, masses were moving in the direction of the left wing of the socialist revolutionaries. This left wing of the socialist revolutionaries eventually split. By this time, the elections to the Constituent Assembly had been declared. Party candidates had been announced. It very often happens, and this is something that we know in our country as well, that if the party leadership, as an analogy, not as an exact thing, think of the 1937 elections in India. It was the Congress left which campaigned and got votes for the Congress. But the candidates who had been put up were mostly Patel's candidates, not candidates of the Congress Socialists. So the Congress left campaigned, but the people who were elected were right-wing. It was the left-wing socialist revolutionaries who had greater support among the peasants But the candidates of the Socialist Revolutionary Party were more often right-wing. This is proved by certain developments. When you look at the new elections to the Soviets are not parliaments, so they had periodic elections. Between August and early October, everywhere that new Soviets were elected, Bolsheviks, either alone or in collaboration with left-wing socialist revolutionaries and Menshevik internationalists and anarchists, won the majority in Soviet after Soviet. This was the position based on which Lenin started pushing that now insurrection should not be seen as a distant goal, it has to be seen as an immediate goal. Because we are already a majority among the politically active masses. One issue which still comes up, it's often argued based on some of Lenin's letters. For example, one of Lenin's letters to Smilga, that Lenin wanted to bypass the Soviets. This is only partially correct. One, Lenin wanted Soviet power. Above all, this is shown by the fact that even while he was writing that letter to Smilga, he was also writing the State and Revolution. But he was saying that the task of insurrection should not be left to the Soviet. The party should organize it. But we have to understand that those who make this argument are again saying that what Lenin said is the only thing that mattered, not what happened in history. Because how did the insurrection occur? In September, new elections to the Petrograd Soviet brought a Bolshevik majority. From that point of time, it was the Petrograd Soviet which started organizing the insurrection. It was the Petrograd Soviet which created a body called the Military Revolutionary Committee, and it was that Military Revolutionary Committee which led the insurrection. So it was a Soviet institution which led the insurrection, and it was practically known when it would begin. They announced, we saw in that film Trotsky saying that yes, we have called for guns and we will go on calling for guns to arm the workers. These guns were being, the Military Revolutionary Committee told the soldiers of the city that you should obey the Military Revolutionary Committee and not the Army High Command. The soldiers accepted this. This meant that the soldiers had gone over to the insurrectionists. So that is why when the insurrection occurred, there was not any need for hundreds of thousands of workers to come out and fight the soldiers. Why should they? The soldiers were on their side. Now, if we find the historians, the bourgeois historians, they make two claims. One is that February was peaceful, October was violent. The other is that February was democratic, October was a coup d'etat. It's very interesting. More than 1,000 people died in February. 27 persons died in October. But October is violent and February was peaceful. The second is that in October, the army and the workers were together. One historian has made a beautiful comment. He says that it was a state without a government. The whole Soviet structure was a state. All it lacked was a government at the top. Facing a government, Kerensky's government, without a state. The state apparatus had deserted Kerensky. All he has is his government. On the other hand, you have the Soviet structure. So the insurrection in 3 days with only 27 deaths overthrew that government. In that case, isn't it still true that the Bolsheviks then imposed a one-party rule? This is, of course, the question that comes up. Why was there a civil war? Was it the Bolsheviks' fault? Because they wanted one-party rule. Now, I have already argued that there was huge working class support. The point is there was opposition to the Soviet power among the left-wing intelligentsia. This is a point that we need to understand again and again. I said much earlier that in Russia, unlike in Western countries, the intelligentsia was a kind of free-floating group. But in course of the years after 1905, the left-wing intelligentsia had come closer to the liberals, and they found it much more comfortable to talk with the liberals than with ordinary, uneducated workers. So, the Mensheviks and the SRs had far more intellectuals. One proof is, even while the Bolsheviks' influence was growing, their papers were very small. They didn't even have many writers. The same article would be reprinted from one paper to another. Mensheviks might be dwindling in working class vote, but they had numerous papers because they had much more numbers of intellectuals who could write, who could only write, perhaps. So you have this situation. The archives have shown something. We are constantly told that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, archival material has come out. Yes, it has come out. Archival material shows that the old Central Executive Committee, that is the Menshevik SR Central Executive Committee, carried out an opinion poll among Soviets in early October. The majority said they wanted either Soviet power or a coalition of all Soviet parties. They suppressed it, and up to early October, they were still asking for a new coalition with the liberal parties. So they, the moderate socialists, had exhausted their popular support. They had become isolated. The Soviet Congress had 650 delegates, and all but a handful voted for a Soviet-based power structure.